marathoners. And today I want to talk a little bit about the mystique of the marathon because it's going to put some things into perspective for you. The marathon is unique in all of the caliber events in the Olympics, in that it's the only one you can't do without specifically training for it. All the others, you can go from swimming to biking, or you can go from to an extent, or you can go from soccer to basketball, things like that. But running is the basis for most of these sports, and most of the runners sub-train. They train for the sprints, and they do the sprint work, but they don't do the distance work. And without doing the distance work, it's impossible to run a marathon. We notice that every year when we come down here, we have all our runners here. A lot of them are middle-aged, and a lot of them are show. And then we have a lot of younger runners. And at about 17-mile mark, which is where the training effect starts to really kick in, we start seeing our runners beginning to pass a lot of the younger runners. And as a matter of fact, in the Honolulu Marathon, the median time right now is 8 hours and 40 minutes. That is, if you do an 8-hour marathon, you have half the field behind you. And many of you are in that area. You're in somewhere, most of us are in the 5 to 8 or 9 hour group. So what you've done is you've entered a field that you couldn't have done without training for, no matter what your age or how well you felt. Now I remember, we have an Olympic decathlete who lives here, and he obviously is running and sprinting and hurdling and everything else, and he's been written up as Hawaii's greatest athlete, and he placed in the Olympics this year. Somebody he did well. Well, he showed up. He hadn't run a marathon, so he decided to run a marathon with his girlfriend. Now, people might say, well, he didn't know what he was getting into, but with all that running, you would think, and the fact that he's a world expert, you'd think he'd have quite a bit of background, even if it was an event he hadn't done. Yet most people drop out at the 17 or 18-mile mark who haven't trained, and he quit at 18 miles. Because now, it wasn't that he couldn't have continued, but he suddenly realized this didn't feel right. In other words, this is turning out to be more of an event than he expected it to be. It wasn't something he could just cross over. And there was an article written about him recently, and calling him Hawaii's greatest athlete, and indeed he may be. I consider Duncan McDonald, a marathon runner who broke the 4-minute mile in high school, to be the athlete because he showed the ability to do the high speeds and the long distances. But that's a matter of just, but I'm sure everybody, both of them are equivalent or great runners. So that was sort of interesting, and while I'm certain that he could have finished on that day, and he did when he came back and showed up with his girlfriend the next time, and they did do the marathon. So he was capable, but obviously he had to get ready for it. And that's another interesting thing is we have all these regular runners who are soccer players or basketball players or whatever, and they usually show up on the day of the event, and as I mentioned, you get to see them out there. And it's almost a universal phenomenon. You don't find very many runners who said, well, I just did it as a lark, and I was going to do it. They say, no, it was very hard, I quit. Or they said, yeah, I planned on 8 hours, and I did it at 14. I mean, that's a different form of quitting or caving in. I did that in my first marathon. I was running a sub 3:30 pace, and I hit the wall at the 18-mile mark in Boston, and I did a 4:23. So I finished about an hour slower than I had predicted. My second marathon, I did 3:30, and that still didn't qualify for Boston. My third marathon, I did a 3:24, and that was gun time, which is where they fire the gun in. It takes a minute or two to cross the starting line. And I ran that marathon in Boston very cautiously because that certificate was more difficult for me to get than going to medical school. I mean, I had to go there now. So I did a very cautious run, and I did all right, although I really wanted to break 3:20. More than you need to know, but to know how I'm approaching this from the back door. Now, the other interesting thing that puts it into perspective is that it takes 13 years to train for the marathon. In other words, if you ran a marathon this year and continued to train, you'll run 13 years from now, you'll run faster than you will now. And so it means you're running faster than you can age, or you're reversing the effects of aging. Now, now you say yes, yes, yes. Well, if you notice, like in the swimming, these types of events, all the records are set at the 19-year-old or the 21 or 2-year-old age group. And so are the shorter events. If you look at the marathon in the Olympics or any other, who's winning them? The 33-year-olds. You don't see a 22-year-old wins Boston Marathon. You see, so this is an absolute physiologic constant, which is characteristic of which makes the marathon so interesting. In other words, you're doing something a world-class athlete can't do unless he's trained for it. And so when you get up there at about an 18-mile mark, you are truly a unique individual. But what's important about that is we read all these articles on how to train or how to do this or what to eat, diet, and tons of stuff. Well, I can't remember all of the things that are supposed to be in the diet, but when they publish a diet on the Olympic athletes or on the world-class marathon runners, they're eating all the proper foods. And so I just look at the event that they're doing to know that they're eating properly, and those are the recommendations that I will make. And so, congratulations for entering a world-class event. You're all going to be stars. You're entering something unique, and you're entering something that can't just be done at the drop of a hat. So I know you're working hard at it, but it is hard work, and every one of us knows that.